Hello, thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're going to give more attendees a chance to get logged in. Additionally, there's one thing that you should be aware of. If you are using your phone to listen to the audio, we are going to be relying on video for a portion of today's webinar. And unfortunately, if you are listening on your phone, you will not be able to hear any audio during that portion while the video is playing. You'll need to be listening through the computer audio in order to hear the video presentation. So please do be aware of that. We apologize for any inconvenience. Uh, Thanks very much. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes to get started with the presentation. Thanks. Again, to everyone just joining, we're going to be relying on video for a portion of today's webinar. And in order to hear the audio during that video portion, you're going to need to be listening with computer audio. So anybody who is using their phone to listen today, um, please switch over to computer audio if you're able. And additionally, we will be making the presentation available on our website after the meeting. So if all else fails, you can listen to the presentation that way. Thanks very much. We're going to get started in just a minute. Hello, and welcome to this webinar on the Restaurant Beverage Program. This is a proposed ordinance that would create an administrative clearance process for sit-down restaurants to serve alcohol in the city of Los Angeles. I'm Neil Huffman of Los Angeles City Planning. I'm joined today by my colleagues Deborah Cahan, Phyllis Nathanson, Roberto Luna, and Jaime Espinosa. We're going to begin with a presentation on the background and key provisions of the proposed program, after which we'll take your questions. If you want to ask us a question, you can type it into the questions pane on your GoToWebinar control panel. If you're not sure where to find the questions pane, here's what it looks like. It's possible your control panel may have automatically collapsed toward the right edge of the screen. You can expand it using the orange arrow. After that, you can use the small arrows on the left side of the control panel to expand the questions pane. We'll be monitoring questions as they come in and answering them after the presentation is concluded. Additionally, there is a Spanish version of this webinar happening at the same time. The information contained in both the English and Spanish webinars will be the same, including the question and answer portion. We'll have Spanish-speaking staff translating the questions and answers as we respond. And there may be some brief pauses as we give our staff adequate time to finish translating. One other note, today's webinar, including the presentation and the questions and answers, is being recorded. It'll be available for viewing on planning.lacity.org for the benefit of those who weren't able to participate today. Thanks for joining us. Let's go over the proposed restaurant beverage program. Los Angeles City Planning has drafted the proposed Restaurant Beverage Program, or RBP, to simplify the process for sit-down restaurants to provide alcohol service. This signature initiative is intended to provide a boost to small businesses and assist the city's recovery from the COVID-19 emergency. At the same time, it seeks to establish clear rules and preserve enforcement options to ensure that restaurants act as good neighbors and provide a benefit to the community. The RBP responds to a City Council motion calling for the creation of an administrative review process for on-site alcohol consumption, subject to a set of standards intended to protect neighborhoods from negative impacts. The RBP would be available to sit-down restaurants only. No bars, nightclubs, or retail stores would be eligible to participate. Participating restaurants would be subject to more than 50 performance standards. They would have to submit to mandatory inspections, and the city would have ample options at its disposal for enforcing the program requirements and correcting violations. A main objective of the RBP is to simplify and shorten the process for sit-down restaurants to be able to serve alcohol. Currently, any business wishing to sell alcohol must apply for a conditional use permit, a process that can take more than 6 months and more than $13,000 in permit fees and other costs to complete. It involves a public hearing, and the decision maker can impose specific conditions of approval on a case-by-case basis. All alcohol selling businesses currently need to go through this process, regardless of whether they are clubs, bars, or liquor stores that are focused primarily on alcohol, or just restaurants serving beer, wine, or cocktails as an incidental aspect of the dining experience. For small businesses in particular, the CUP process can be time-consuming and costly. Even though the vast majority of restaurants are good neighbors to their communities and have few problems related to alcohol service. A standardized process could help cut down on time and costs, while still offering the same protections to neighborhoods in terms of operating standards and enforcement mechanisms. And of course, the city is very cognizant of the challenges that small businesses, particularly new businesses, will be facing in a post-COVID-19 environment. And we're looking for ways to ease burdens on those businesses. The fact is that alcohol sales provide a substantial portion of restaurants' revenue and often make or break their viability as a business. Creating a clearer, simpler, more predictable, less costly process to begin selling alcohol would give these businesses a boost
and reduce the time needed for them to open their doors and start hiring people. City Planning released an initial draft ordinance to the public in October 2018. Since then, we've incorporated a lot of feedback, resulting in a substantially modified ordinance. The overall approach is the same, but we've added a number of things in response to what we heard. There's a new set of more selective eligibility criteria to filter out bars and clubs. There are additional performance standards to help address concerns related to noise and community monitoring. And we've added a stronger enforcement process where repeated violations result in the restaurant being suspended from the program. Here's a more complete view of our overall timeline. City Planning released its initial draft of the ordinance back in October 2018. We conducted 2 staff-level public hearings to gather input in December 2018 and January 2019. And since then, we've been accepting additional input, including targeted conversations with key community stakeholders, and we've been making revisions to the 2018 draft. We released the revised ordinance in April of this year, and following this update info session, we'll be presenting the proposed ordinance for the consideration of the City Planning Commission, tentatively set for June 11th. As stated previously, the RBP sets up an administrative review process that would enable sit-down restaurants to serve alcoholic beverages without a conditional use permit. We estimate that the processing time would be approximately 3 weeks, and fees would come to about $4,000. That's compared to 6 months and $13,000 for a conditional use permit. Bars, nightclubs, and alcohol retailers like markets and liquor stores would not be eligible. Those businesses would still need to use the existing CUP process. Participating restaurants would have to meet over 50 performance standards, including limits on hours, noise restrictions, and security requirements. They would have to enroll in the city's Monitoring, Verification, and Inspections program, which we'll detail later in the presentation. There would be a 3-strike enforcement process that would lead to repeat violators losing their right to participate in the program. And all businesses would be subject to the city's existing process for nuisance abatement and revocations. Again, the RBP is only for select sit-down restaurants, and there are specific rules that all participating businesses must follow to ensure they're operating as a restaurant. Any restaurant that doesn't want to follow these rules would still be free to use the existing conditional use permit process. Participating restaurants need to have a kitchen that makes food to order, a full menu, and a dining room. They can't be takeout or delivery only, and they can't have a drive-through. Hours are limited to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. There has to be continuous food service while the restaurant is open, and food and beverages have to be delivered to tables by employees. The restaurant needs to have at least 20, but no more than 150 seats. It can't be part of a multi-tenant entitlement, like what's typically done for a hotel or in a shopping mall. And it can't have any on-site entertainment beyond ambient music. Things like loud music, pool tables, dancing, and karaoke are prohibited, as is adult entertainment. The RBP would be open to all eligible new restaurants, even if they've already applied for a conditional use approval and are awaiting review. It would also be open to existing restaurants who are seeking a conditional use approval to serve alcohol for the first time, or whose approval is expiring. The existing restaurant would need to meet all of the program's eligibility requirements and operating standards the same as if they were a brand new establishment. In the case of restaurants who've applied for new or renewed CUPs, we're prepared to accommodate them by offering a partial refund on the fees they've already paid in the event they decide to switch to the RBP. A partial refund is available up until the public hearing for the conditional use approval is scheduled. The RBP has eligibility requirements that are written specifically to filter out bars, nightclubs, and retail stores. All alcohol has to be served by employees, There can't be a cover charge or a drink minimum, and the entire restaurant has to be all ages. The restaurant can't offer bottle service on distilled spirits, and it can't sell Magnum wine bottles. There can't be any prepaid promotions like pub crawls, and employees can't accept or solicit tips in the form of free drinks. The RBP also has operating standards that ensure restaurants remain good neighbors to the community. Some of these have to do with outdoor seating and potential noise impacts to adjacent properties. A restaurant can't have more than 30% of its seats outdoors, and they can't put TV monitors or play amplified music in the outdoor dining area. There can't be any shared seating with other businesses, like in a food court. And there are additional outdoor dining restrictions near residential zones. As I mentioned previously, there can't be any live entertainment, such as karaoke or DJs. Only indoor background music is allowed. The restaurant has to comply with citywide noise regulations. It can't be bought out for private events. It can't serve alcohol from portable bar carts. And if there's any booth or group seating, it can't obscure the occupants from view. The program also contains some security and monitoring requirements. The restaurant is responsible for maintaining the premises, removing any litter or graffiti, keeping trash bins locked, posting no loitering signs, and providing exterior lighting. They have to take all reasonable steps to prevent or discourage unlawful or nuisance behavior, including calling law enforcement. There are security measures required, including camera surveillance and an electronic age verification device for alcohol purchases. The restaurant has to follow workplace smoking laws, which means no smoking, vaping, or hookahs. There has to be an on-duty manager at all times, and the restaurant has to enroll its employees in one of several approved training programs for alcohol service. There are several requirements designed to assist community members and the city in monitoring the restaurant. One of these is that the restaurant has to post a decal showing that they're participating in the RBP and subject to all of the standards. They have to post signs with contact information for complaints and respond to complaints within 24 hours. They need to log the complaints and how they were resolved, and the city can review this information to make sure the restaurant is maintaining a good relationship with the community. There are a number of administrative requirements, one of which is that the applicable council office and neighborhood council will be notified each time a restaurant in their district applies for the program. Applicants have to pay inspection fees, submit plans, and record a covenant that they agree to comply with the RBP standards. If they change their alcohol license, if they change their floor plan, or if the business is sold or transferred, they have to reapply to continue participating in the RBP. The city also has the ability to enforce the program requirements and bring bad actors into line. To help us with this, all participating restaurants will need to enroll in our monitoring, verification, and inspections program, in which the business pays a monitoring fee to the city, and we make at least 2 unannounced inspections over a 3-year period. Additionally, the Department of Building and Safety can order the restaurant to correct any general code violations, and the LAPD or Building and Safety can cite them, both for violating any of the program requirements and for more serious health and safety issues. Each order to comply from Building and Safety or citation from LAPD that's filed with the LA Superior Court counts as a strike. If the restaurant racks up 3 strikes within a 2-year period, it gets suspended from the program for the next 5 years. And it has to apply for a conditional use permit if it wants to keep serving alcohol. As mentioned previously, the proposed ordinance is tentatively set to be considered by the City Planning Commission on June 11th. We'll be preparing a staff recommendation report for the Commission's consideration. The report will be available when the meeting agenda is posted, which is at least 72 hours before the Commission meeting. It'll be posted at the link on your screen. If you have any comments on the proposed ordinance, please address them to our staff contact, Roberto Luna, at roberto.luna@lacity.org. You can also deliver your comments during the meeting via phone. That concludes the presentation. If you need to get in touch with us, please contact the planner shown on your screen, Roberto Luna, roberto.luna@lacity.org, 213-473-9701. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we're going to begin the question and answer portion in just a moment. A couple of items in our presentation that we want to address. One is that the June 11th tentative date for the ordinance to go to the City Planning Commission is just that, it's tentative. The timing of our commission meetings and when certain agenda items get scheduled is, as you imagine, in flux due to the current emergency situation. So we will be sending out an email to our list of interested parties when that date is actually set. And you can join that list of interested parties if you're not sure you're already on it or you just want to join. You can email the same planner who is shown at the end of the presentation, Roberto Luna, roberto.luna@lacity.org. Additionally, we just want to remind everyone this is an informational webinar. No decision is being made today. That will happen at the City Planning Commission meeting, which again is tentatively set for June. Okay, so I think we're ready to launch into the question and answer period. And for this portion, I'm joined by my colleagues, Deborah Cahan and Phyllis Nathanson. And additionally, a reminder that we are doing live Spanish translation for a separate Spanish language webinar. And we might pause for a few moments here and there just to give the translation a chance to catch up. So the first question I'm going to pose to Phyllis and Deborah, and either one of you feel free to tackle this one. Could you explain the following statement, separating outdoor seating from residentially zoned property by an enclosed building? So Phyllis and Deborah, how are we addressing concerns of outdoor seating being adjacent to residential zones?
Hi, this is Deborah Cahan. What's meant by that statement is that when a restaurant wants to include outdoor seating as part of its floor plan, we are requiring that an enclosed building, meaning one that is fully enclosed, one that is able to be screened, one that would serve as a screen between the outdoor seating and the residential area nearby would be provided. So in other words, if there was seating outside of this restaurant, there would be a building in between the outdoor seating and the parts of and the agricultural or the residentially zoned parcels that are adjacent to that outdoor seating.
Okay, moving on. There's a question about neighborhood councils and how they can be given a chance to have input, both with regard to restaurants applying to participate in the restaurant beverage program and in the adoption of this ordinance specifically. So Phyllis, Deborah, either of you care to tackle that?
Would you mind rephrasing that question or repeating it?
Sure, sure. Basically, just how can neighborhood councils have have a chance to have their say, um, both as this ordinance is being considered and adopted, and on the participation of restaurants in the program after this is implemented.
Sure, this is Deborah Cahan again. So neighborhood councils, as always, are part of the legislative process in the sense that we are always looking to them for letters regarding their opinions on proposed ordinances. So at this point, we are still expressing our draft proposal and we are sharing that information. We are going to be moving to the City Planning Commission next. Between now and then, statements from neighborhood councils are welcome and encouraged to be submitted. Before statements may be ready to be prepared, the planning staff is available to respond to questions and have conversations so that the appropriate information is relayed to neighborhood councils. As we move forward, once we're at the City Planning Commission hearing with our proposal, there will be, as there was before, there will be an opportunity for public comment. And there is an option for people to call in and to speak to the commission and to ask questions and express opinions and provide testimony. Moving forward from there, any committee hearings and the final city planning, or rather city council hearing, would similarly maintain that same public comment period for neighborhood councils to weigh in. With regard to the second question, this would be an administrative process for these restaurants to receive a permit from the City of Los Angeles to alcohol. That means that there would not be a discretionary review process, and it would be based off of plans submitted and eligibility criteria and performance standards that are met. The notification is the form of communication with the neighborhood council. So once an applicant has applied for a restaurant beverage program administrative permit, the neighborhood council is notified. The state license from the ABC is still required to serve alcohol. So there is also the process that the state has as well. Phyllis, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. This is Phyllis Nathanson. I just wanted to add that part of the program, as Neil had explained earlier in the narration of the presentation, involves a decal that participating restaurants will display on their window that's visible to anybody passing by. So neighborhoods can monitor how these restaurants are doing. They will know the standards that are required of these restaurants, and if there are any concerns about non-compliance, it would be a great service to the community for stakeholders and neighborhood councils to notify either the police department or building and safety for enforcement.
Thanks, Phyllis. Next, we have a question about breweries. What about breweries that don't have kitchens? Are they eligible? And the answer would be no. If there's a brewery that has a tap room that does not have a commercial kitchen attached to it, that is making food to order, where employees are bringing out meals to seated diners, then that business would not be eligible to take advantage of this program. They would still have the existing process for a conditional use permit available to them, but this program is oriented towards sit-down restaurants. Moving on, if the city maintains the current permission of takeout and delivery on alcohol, how would that affect this ordinance? Phyllis and Deborah, care to respond?
I'm sorry, repeat the question one more time.
This is referring to the current emergency permission for restaurants to offer alcohol for takeout and delivery, and how that current emergency order would affect this ordinance.
Sure. So the state's relaxation of certain regulations are independent of this effort that we are undertaking right now. What we are doing right now is not emergency in nature, the way that seemingly the state's actions are. What we are proposing to do is for restaurants to be able to take it to apply for this program and be able to serve alcohol at their restaurant indefinitely as long as they comply with all of the performance standards and successfully pass our enforcement measures. Whether the state continues or doesn't continue is independent of this. We cannot override what the state does. So it would just be that the city of Los Angeles is permitting more restaurants to serve alcohol on site. And what the state does at the state level is independent and out of our control as to how that impacts the restaurant beverage program. Anything you
And
want to add, Phyllis?
yeah, it's Phyllis again. So I'd just like to add that we anticipate that the state's relaxation of the rules is temporary during this emergency. And when restaurants are able to function in a more normal, standard way, that we anticipate that that relaxation of the rules will no longer be enforced.
Okay, moving on. Next question. Does this mean drinking starts at 7 a.m.? Any way you can hold that off until lunch?
This is Deborah Cahan. The reasoning behind those hours was to match existing regulations regarding commercial corner developments. So on commercial corners, there is a requirement in the code that the business hours are from 7 to 11. This also matches the intent of restaurants. We believe that there may be a brunch spot, or a spot that may serve brunch, which may be opening earlier in the daytime, perhaps not necessarily serving at 7 a.m., but being open at 7 a.m. So we don't want to infringe upon how a business conducts its business, or a restaurant conducts its business. And we also want to be mindful of the other restrictions and regulations that come into play. So that explains why our recommendation is from 7 to 11.
And I want to add, it's Phyllis, that the alcohol service in these establishments is incidental to a regular menu. So these are not drinking establishments, they're regular restaurants.
Thanks, Phyllis. Next, we have a question relating to our timeline. When do you think this will actually be approved? And what we can project are the things that we, the planning department, control, which is when this is put on the agenda for our city planning commission, which again is tentatively set for June 11th, although it's still subject to change while we get all of our virtual meeting schedules worked out. Beyond that, it is really up to the city council how quickly it moves through the legislative process, and that is totally out of our control. It is up to the committee heads and the council president when it gets scheduled and when it comes up for a vote. Phyllis, Deborah, anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Next question, can this be used by a restaurant within a hotel where alcohol is served in the hotel restaurant as well as in a hotel lounge? Phyllis and Deborah, care to address that?
Hotels and other campus-like developments typically apply for master conditional use permits, which is grouping a lot of tenant spaces underneath one entitlement request for a conditional use permit to sell alcohol in this case. So we are excluding those type of applicants because we believe that in a hotel-like environment or a campus-like environment, the whole development should be looked at comprehensively and not individually on a one-by-one cases, which would potentially miss larger cumulative impacts of that establishment. So we are excluding the ability for master conditional use permit applications to participate in the restaurant beverage program.
Okay, and a similar question that I think may have been addressed by your answer just now, where there is a master conditional use for multiple restaurant tenants in a shopping center, would the individual tenants still be subject to plan approvals, or could they get approval via the restaurant beverage program, so long as they comply with the standards?
If all of the standards and all of the eligibility requirements are met, then a restaurant could participate in the restaurant beverage program in lieu of pursuing a plan approval. So in other words, if a permit is up to be renewed, but that establishment is compliant and meets all the criteria of the restaurant beverage program, they would be able to instead pursue the restaurant beverage program.
And Deborah, I apologize. As I was unmuting myself, my audio might have gotten caught off. But this question applies specifically to cases where there's a master CUB for multiple tenants in a shopping center. Does that would that change anything about your answer there?
It does. In that case, they would not be eligible because they are part of a master conditional use permit application.
Okay. A couple of questions regarding enforcement and what if there are violations? What if community members submit complaints that a restaurant is not abiding by the standards? And we covered this a little in the presentation, but maybe Phyllis and Deborah, you'd like to go into a little more detail on that?
Deborah, would you like me to take that?
Oh, I'm happy to take it. I was trying to unmute myself. So we have several enforcement mechanisms available at our disposal, and it ranges from community involvement to city initiated inspections. So at the community level, we have, as Phyllis mentioned before, a decal requirement so that these businesses that have received a permit through this process would identify themselves, and it would enable easier enforcement as the community is on the ground and they see what's going on day to day, and they would be able to submit complaints based off of what was happening at the ground. We also have the requirement for a phone number to be posted for complaints or concerns that that consumers can use to contact somebody that represents or manages that restaurant. In addition to community enforcement, we also that leads us to our 3 strikes enforcement procedure. So a complaint from a community member could lead to an order to comply that's issued by the Department of Building and Safety. And the orders to comply and any LAPD filed citations that regard a restaurant beverage program performance standards are tallied. So these two forms of citations, if you will if a restaurant receives 3 of these within a 2-year period, they're suspended from the program. And I'll elaborate on that a bit. That 2-year clock starts after the first strike, if you will, is hit. So after the first order to comply or filed citation by the PD comes about, then that 2-year clock begins. If there are 2 more strikes, if you will, within that period of time of 2 years, then that establishment cannot participate in the restaurant beverage program for a period of 5 years, and they can no longer sell or they can no longer serve alcohol unless they pursued a conditional use permit. In addition to the decal, the phone number, and the 3 strikes enforcement procedure, we also have a requirement that these establishments participate in the MVIP program. The MVIP program, that stands for Monitoring, Verification, and Inspections Program, is a joint program between the Department of Building and Safety and the Department of City Planning. This came about it was developed a few years ago, and all establishments receiving a conditional use permit to sell alcohol must enroll in this program. So we are not treating these type of applicants any differently. The restaurant beverage program participants would also have to enroll in the MVIP program. And what the MVIP program includes is 2 unannounced inspections by the Department of Building and Safety within 36 months. So this suite of enforcement procedures is how we envision enforcement happening for the restaurant beverage program. And I'd just like to note that the 3-strike enforcement procedure was something that it is something new to the department that we have researched and proposed working alongside the Department of Building and Safety, and it was crafted in response to feedback we heard after releasing our 2018 proposal.
This is Phyllis. I just wanted to add one more item. So in our code today, we have a nuisance abatement and revocation process that is in effect, and all the participants in the restaurant beverage program would also, in addition to everything else that was described, they would also be subject to these provisions in our code.
Okay, thanks, Phyllis. Next, we have a question about the provision regarding booth seating and not obscuring the occupants from view, and just wanting us to elaborate a little bit on what obscuring the occupants from view means. And if I remember correctly, that mainly has to do with the height of the partition around the booth. Phyllis or Deborah, would you care to elaborate?
The meaning behind that performance standard is to maintain an environment that is, if you will, innocuous or friendly to anybody coming in. So maintaining that line of vision between staff and patrons is important to maintain the environment that we're looking to support with the restaurant beverage program. Phyllis, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, only that we're just, as you said, we're just creating an environment, it's a neighborhood restaurant where alcohol is incidental to the dining experience, not creating to avoid any situation where there's privacy constructed so as to obscure any kind of unseemly behavior by patrons that don't have any place in this type of friendly, neighborhood friendly and family friendly type of restaurant.
Okay, moving on. Asking for clarification on the provision requiring employees to conduct service of alcohol. Does that mean it has to be brought to a table, or will an employee handing alcohol to a customer at the counter be within the guidelines?
The alcohol must be brought to the table by the server.
in addition to the food
Okay.
and other beverages. I just wanted to add that. So all food and beverages are to be brought to the table.
Okay. A question about the idea of overconcentration and how we are how the city plans to address concerns about creating an overconcentration of alcohol serving establishments in a given area. And the question asker cites the heart of Hollywood in particular as a problem area. So anything to address concerns about overconcentration of alcohol?
So again, this restaurant beverage program is designed with many performance standards and eligibility criteria that takes a restaurant down to really a if you will, a basic restaurant that serves that can serve anybody. So the combination of all of these performance standards creates an environment that's benign, especially coupled with our enforcement mechanisms. And the so the additional restaurants that may participate in the restaurant beverage program would not be contributing major nuisance or much nuisance at all, if any, to the neighborhood due to the constraints that they would have to be operating within. Phyllis, would you like to add anything to that?
I think that covers it. We're looking for restaurants that are family friendly, neighborhood friendly, that where the alcohol really isn't the draw. It's really the food, and the alcohol just happens to accompany that.
Okay. Next, we have a couple of questions requesting clarification on how this ordinance would apply to existing restaurants. One is a case where if an existing restaurant has a conditional use permit with conditions of approval that are more restrictive than the RBP performance standards. For example, if the CUP requires shorter hours of operation, whereas the RBP would, in cases where where for whatever reason the CUP requires shorter hours of operation or just has a more restrictive standard attached to it, are there any options available for such restaurants to be able to take advantage of the less restrictive RBP standards without having to go through an entitlement process such as a plan approval?
So the restaurant beverage program is an administrative process, and it is the same for everybody. So the requirements are the same across the board. A restaurant, as so long as they meet the criteria of the restaurant beverage program, would be able to partake. That being said, the performance standards that are included in the restaurant beverage program are based off of those typically seen in conditional use permit standards. Conditional use permit conditions. So we come from a starting point of addressing issues typically seen with restaurants applying for a conditional use permit to serve alcohol. Anything you'd like to add, Phyllis?
Yeah, and they would have to comply with all the standards of the program. They couldn't just pick and choose. So it's a program, a complete program, and if they are eligible and comply with all the standards, then they could convert from a conditional use permit to this program.
Great, thank you. Question about will the video presentation be uploaded in Spanish as well for those that are not present? I will need to check to confirm with our Spanish language team, but I'm pretty certain that they are recording things on their end as well, and that video audio will also be available. We can certainly make it available, and we'll make a note to follow up on that. Another question about when will the application process be available? So, of course, at this time, this is only a proposed program. It still needs to go through the full adoption process of being approved by the City Planning Commission and passing the legislative process at the City Council. And we, of course, cannot make any guarantees as to the timeline on that. It's safe to say probably at least a few more months, even if things move very quickly. But we can't offer any certainty beyond that.
I'd like to add that because this is going through an adoption process, there is the possibility that the requirements of the program or the nature of how the program works could be modified as it goes through this process.
Another question, can the hours of operation be revised after a year to go past the 11 p.m. closing? And any changes to the ordinance as it eventually gets adopted by the City Council would be a legislative matter that essentially the City Council would have to decide to change that. At least that's currently written. Phyllis or Deborah, anything to add?
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether the question pertained to a participating restaurant or the ordinance itself. So Neil, you responded to the ordinance. And I would just like to add that if an establishment is participating in the program, there is no variation or deviation from the standards. These are the rules. And if your restaurant is able to comply and wishes to comply, then you can participate in the program. If you wish to stay open longer or deviate in other ways from the program standards, then you would have to go through the conditional use permit process, which is still available to you.
Thanks, Phyllis. Next, what does it mean when you say we can't close for private events? So the provision as currently written in the ordinance is that the entirety of the restaurant cannot be bought out for private events. There can be a banquet room or a private dining room that can be reserved for a private party. But as far as buying out the entire restaurant, that would make the restaurant ineligible for the program if it allows that.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the threshold would be more than 50%, or rather up to 50% could be closed for a private event, but at least 50% has to be available to the public. Of seating, pardon me, of seating.
Thanks, Deborah. Next, this was addressed somewhat during the presentation. We're in the process of renewing our CUP process, but the fees are extremely high, and asking about any options or waiving of fees if they want to switch to the RBP.
If an applicant is currently awaiting review for a conditional use permit and hasn't yet been scheduled for a public hearing, they are eligible for a partial refund. The extent of that refund depends on how much work the Department of City Planning has done in processing that application. Did that answer all of that question? Is there more to that?
I think it does, Deborah. So here's a question regarding expansion of existing restaurants. We are looking to try and expand our seating area by using an adjacent parcel, by creating a pass-through service area. Does this apply to us? Phyllis or Deborah, any care to address this question regarding restaurants who are expanding, existing restaurants who are expanding their premises?
So I'm assuming that this is Phyllis. I'm assuming that this restaurant already has a conditional use permit and is looking to expand. They could apply for the restaurant beverage program, and if they comply with all of the standards and eligibility criteria, then they could participate. But if a restaurant is already participating in the restaurant beverage program, which is not in effect yet, but assuming when it goes into effect, if a restaurant wants to expand or change their mode of operation, they would need to come back through the program application process so the planning department can check their plans and ensure that they're still in compliance with the rules.
Thanks, Phyllis. Next question, what role do council district offices play in this program? Do they have the ability to oppose an applicant?
The council office is notified of an applicant filing for a restaurant beverage program permit. This is the same type of notification that the neighborhood council gets. There is no decision-making power that the city council holds with regards to the restaurant beverage program. It is just an administrative review process that is done within the Department of City Planning.
Okay. Next, a question regarding expediting the approval process of the program to help restaurants that are currently struggling, and that is largely in the hands of our city council as to whether they choose to hold fewer hearings or attach an urgency clause to the ordinance. That is completely in the hands of our city council. Next question, are the proposed 50 performance standards available online? Yes, the entire proposed ordinance that would create the restaurant beverage program is available at planning.lacity.org. If you click on plans and policies and then proposed zoning regulations. Would this need to go to the full city council following the planning commission? Yes, it would.
It looks like it's getting close to 1. I think we might be running over just a bit to answer the remaining questions.
Yes, it all depends on our availability. And we will. There is a fairly significant list of questions left over. So we're going to play it by ear, and if we get to 1:30, 2 o'clock, we will. We may have to cut things off. Next question, can a restaurant with an existing Type 41 apply for a Type 47 utilizing this new program? I believe those refer to license types for the State Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. And I can tell you that that is a completely separate process. What we're talking here is the local land use clearance that the city of Los Angeles controls. With respect to the State Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, that is a completely separate process, and this program would not affect how that state process works. And Phyllis and Deborah, I'll let you add anything if you like.
No, that covers it. Thank you.
Another question in the fact sheet, it says that only neighborhood councils and LAPD will be notified of new applications, and just asking how other community members can give their opinion on restaurants that apply to the program.
So a point of clarification is that this is notification to the neighborhood council and to the city council district office. So there's no interplay between the two. It's just notification. There isn't a place to provide comments in response to that notification.
Thanks. If the city or county, if the city does not allow for dining rooms to open by this summer, can this program still be put in place for takeout beer and wine? And I believe we've addressed that already, but if either of you would care to reiterate.
If a restaurant receives a permit from the city to serve alcohol through the restaurant beverage program, then they have local approval to serve alcohol on site. If the state changes their regulations that influences what the type of business that we're targeting can do with their alcohol serving, that's independent of what we can control. So we only are saying that from a local level, these restaurants can serve alcohol on site. And then the state has more authority. They may be able to but that is an independent process, and what the state does is separate than what the city does.
And I'd like to add that it's temporary. We're anticipating, assuming that it is a temporary situation on the part of the state, and that we will go back to a more normal situation with respect to the state licenses once the emergency has dissipated. But our ordinance is a permanent ordinance.
Thanks again. Next question is about assistance in filling out our city planning application forms, particularly the environmental assessment form. Phyllis or Deborah, you care to let the question asker know what kinds of resources are available at our public counter, for example?
Yeah, I think participants can receive some assistance filling out an application at our development services counter. Because this is not a discretionary entitlement, or it's not a discretionary application, it's not subject to CEQA rules, so there would not be any environmental analysis. The environmental analysis would be just for adopting the ordinance.
Okay. Next, what was the thinking behind excluding fast casual from the RBP, for example, a Chipotle? And just a note, I want to make sure that we understand that the order at the counter business model would still be consistent with the eligibility criteria and operating standards. It's just that the food and beverages would need to be brought out to tables by employees after the customer has ordered. Anyone care to elaborate?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Will the incidental sale of alcohol for off-site consumption be prohibited?
So this is for restaurants. So whatever the restaurant license allows the restaurant to do would be allowed under this program. So there is some off-site sales that restaurants are allowed to do under their license, and they would still be allowed to do that.
Next question, will there be a list of recommended video surveillance solutions to facilitate restaurant owners interested in this program?
Not sure I understand the question.
I think the question asker is expressing concern is that there are lots of proprietary products out there on the market for video surveillance, and they're saying it might make it difficult for law enforcement to effectively access surveillance footage. So currently, the ordinance doesn't contain any specific provisions, specifying what type of surveillance technology is to be provided, other than it just has to output at a certain resolution and a certain number of frames per second. Phyllis and Deborah, I don't know if you want to provide any more details as to the specific types of surveillance technology
Yeah,
required.
no, this is a standard that is typically applied as a condition of approval to all conditional use permits. We're just carrying it forward to the restaurant beverage program. So in implementation, if there is, if it's found that there's a need to assist proprietors with this, we can look into that, but it's not part of the ordinance at this point.
And Neil, this is Deborah. I think we should wrap up. We have 2 questions from the Spanish webinar that haven't been answered yet. I believe they're at the bottom of the list that you see. If we could pull those up and then invite everybody else to
Sure.
please email us their questions so we can get back to them. I think that would be great to take those last 2 questions and then provide our
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Question from the Spanish webinar, how will you consider and up to what point will residents be taken into consideration for new applications?
Is this question asking whether local residents get any particular boost in this program for being local versus an outsider coming in, or is there a way to clarify on that question?
In terms of priority?
Right.
That is my understanding of
Okay.
the question, Deborah.
Okay. Yeah. So
I don't know if the asker would like to clarify.
well, based on that assumption, the answer would be that I have 2 things to say about that. One is that, again, this is administrative. It is open to everybody as so long as that applicant meets all the eligibility criteria and adheres to the performance standards. That being said, we are planning on creating a post-implementation program that would target neighborhoods and community members at the local level and help people who live in their neighborhoods take advantage of this program by holding some specialized trainings to assist them in getting a leg up with their business model.
Okay, and one more, will residents have the opportunity to report possible violations?
I think
Absolutely.
we go ahead, Deborah. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no problem. Yeah, I think as Phyllis was going to say, we did mention this before, but absolutely, there'll be several levels at which um, a, a community member could be involved with enforcement. As mentioned earlier, there's going to be a decal identifying this restaurant as being a participant of the RBP program or the RBP, and that will facilitate the ability for community members to file any necessary complaints. In addition to that, they can call the Department of Building and Safety directly, or rather through a 311 app or dialing 311 in order um, to file a complaint that may result in an order to comply from the Department of Building and Safety, or possibly, if appropriate, a citation from the LAPD.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. At this point, we are 10 minutes over time, so we're going to have to cut off the questions and answers there. If we did not get to your question, we apologize. There was a lengthy list of questions that we were not able to get to. However, we are always available over email to take your questions and comments, and if there's anything you're curious about, please do email Roberto. It's roberto.luna@lacity.org, and you can send your questions through him, and we will do our best to get back to you. Okay. That's going to conclude this webinar. Again, this will be posted at planning.lacity.org. And thank you for joining us.